Hi everybody. We are now moving ahead into chapter 10 in your textbook. So we're approaching the end of our book here. So this chapter really gets into strategies for enhancing instruction. So this is really thinking about the feedback and how we give feedback to our participants during our group fitness classes. What's effective feedback? What is ineffective? As far as performance, how do we cue to the solution? How do we make sure those people in our classes are able to follow and keep up with the cueing that we are giving? So this chapter really just gets into that teaching methodology as far as effective cueing goes and effective feedback. So first of all, looking at just the teaching methodology, really to learn to teach human movement is really complex. The learner definitely has to possess a lot of different skills, things like motor skills, right? They need to have certain motor skills. They need to be able to memorize steps or a process of how to perform a certain move, or they need to understand how the move or the movement is supposed to feel like or look like. They need to have body awareness so they can perform the move correctly. They need to be able to physiologically keep up with what we're trying to do in the class. So it is definitely complex and it is a process. So it does take quite a bit of practice. But as far as the setup, when we're instructing different moves, we need to understand how to not only modify, deliver, but also adjust our teaching methods because that's key in the whole process to meet our participant needs. But also we have to ensure that performance success, and we also want to minimize the risk of injury during our classes too. So again, going back to that setup, what we're doing is we're naming the move, right? Identifying the name or what that movement is. And then we're also cueing them through the position that their body needs to be in or the equipment needs to be in while they perform that move. So that right there is key in the success of them performing different types of movements in our classes. As far as the execution, the follow-up, right? So we've already identified the move and we have, talked them through the body positioning. Now, how do we follow up from that? Well, we want to make sure that we perform the movement correctly through a full range of motion. Okay, so making sure, we're doing them slow and controlled when needed through that full range of motion, and that's going to help with the success of doing the movement. Also, we want to make sure that we offer cues for the most important aspects of the movement, right? So things like breathing. When do we exhale? When do we inhale? There's cue body positions that we really want to reinforce during that movement. So for example, if we're doing a push-up, we really want to enforce that the joints need to be stacked, right? So the shoulders need to be over top of the elbows need to be over top of the wrists in that push-up position. The core needs to be tight and engaged so those hips do not gravitate to the ground when we're in that up position of the push-up. So that's just a couple examples. Also offering those kinesthetic cues, like for example saying engage your core or brace your core like you're getting ready to get punched in the belly, right? So as soon as you say that, they're going to engage their core because kinesthetically they're thinking, oh my gosh, that's what it feels like. I'm going to get punched in the belly. I need to engage, my core for that particular movement. Also, as far as transitions go, it's always good to try to transition smoothly from one move to the next without stopping, when we can. So your group fitness instructor textbook on page 170 gets into 3 different things a group fitness instructor can use in their choreography, and that's matching, mending, and patching. So I also have a video that I'd like you to watch. It's called Using Transitions to Create Cohesive Class Experiences. So if you would pause, the video here, go ahead and play that short couple minute video, and she's going to give you great examples of matching, mending, and patching. Okay, so you should have watched that video. Those are easy things that we can do to transition from one movement to the next without having an odd, stop or a pause, or, we want to make sure some moves transition smoothly together. Certain things just don't go together, so we have to add a transition in between to move smoothly from one move to the next. Also, cueing is very, very important during the whole process. So there are just some standard guidelines that we need to follow when we think about cueing. So first of all, provide no more than one corrective action at a time and choose the most critical. Okay, we want to ensure that gross movement errors are addressed first before refining other aspects of form and technique, right? So if a person is doing, say, a bent over row and they are swinging their upper back, right? When they're pulling the weight, the dumbbells up, they are actually lifting their entire upper body up and then they're lowering their entire body back down. That's a gross movement error that we want to address right away. So we want to make sure that they understand they have to keep their hips still, right? There's no movement at the hip joint and they're holding that position. The only thing that should be moving are those arms. So we're addressing that gross movement error first. And then we can look at the fine movements, and fine tune it. So for example, now we might see, they are rounding their shoulders. Okay, so how can we get them to pull their shoulder blades back towards their spine? So we're trying to refine it after we fix that gross movement error. Also, form and corrective cues should be sequential, starting with the trunk, which is proximal, right? Proximal stability, and then moving to the extremities, the distal stability, unless the gross errors are critically apparent in the specific area of the body. So they should be sequential, starting proximal, right, closest to the center of gravity there, and then going more distal out to those extremities. Cues should also be positive and solution-based. Try to refrain from using words like don't or no, and build your vocabulary to cue what to do as opposed to what not to do. Okay, we want to cue to the solution, not to the problem. So always try to keep those cues positive. Also, something else to point out is to use as few words as possible to deliver your cueing. Okay, number one, that's going to save you, so you're not going to get so winded. Okay, so stand tall. For example, that's a succinct cue. So instead of, saying, okay, I'd like everybody to go ahead and stand up tall now, we're going to reach for the ceiling. I mean, there's a lot of words there, and that can make you winded. So instead, just two simple words, stand tall, right? And immediately you're going to get those folks to stand up tall. Also, rhythmic cues are helpful too. So if we're doing beat-driven types of workouts, we can speak the words right with the rhythm of the music, and that helps them to execute the pace. So rhythmic cues are really fun to use as well. Also, just a quick little think it through question here. Imagine you're leading a group strength class and you're teaching reverse lunges to your participants. As you look around the room, you notice that many participants are performing the exercises with incorrect form. Script out how you would clearly and concisely provide feedback to participants in the form of positive cues that are free of filler words. So take a minute and write it out. What's some clear, concise cueing that you would give to those participants who are performing the reverse lunges incorrectly? Pause the video and write it down. Okay, we're back. So here are 3 different concise, clear cues. Number 1, saying something like, keep the front knee aligned with the front toes. That's concise. Number 2, feel your weight balanced throughout the entire forward foot. That's a kinesthetic cue. And number 3, Imagine growing taller and extend upward through the crown of your head. Imagine. So again, kinesthetic, that's going to get them to stand tall to avoid flexing forward at the hip and leaning forward into that lunge versus keeping your shoulders up to the ceiling. Also, education in group fitness is big. We generally see a large population in our classes. It's the general population. We tend to see, high fit, low fit people in our classes. So we can use that room that we have, that room full of people to educate. All right, so we sometimes can think of ourselves as educators as well. So we have to educate groups of participants all at once versus training individuals one-on-one like a personal trainer does. As a result, the education typically caters to the general population while being mindful of participants' needs, goals, and limitations. We should stay abreast of a variety of exercise science subjects that will enable us to educate participants in a meaningful way during each class. So ACE talks about the triple F, form, function, and fit. Form, basically, an example of that would be saying something like, stand with feet hip width apart to create a solid base of support. Keeping the core engaged, initiate the movement by hinging at the hips. So we're educating the class on proper form of that movement. Function, saying something like, since squats are a movement pattern that we perform frequently in our everyday lives, they serve the very functional purpose of training the body to move more efficiently both inside and outside of the gym. For example, bracing the core helps to stabilize that lumbar spine, reducing the potential for developing low back issues later down the road. So we're giving them some education on the functionality, why we do that squat in class, because, hey, you do this every day in everyday life. So we're educating them on that purpose. And fit means what muscles are being targeted. So saying something like, this is a multi-joint exercise. It involves multiple muscles, but it primarily targets the quads, the hamstrings, and the glutes. So the triple F, during class, we're educating them on a simple move like a squat. We're giving them proper form. We're telling them the functionality of it and why and how we use it every day in our lives. And then we're telling them the fit, what muscles it's actually working. So this is a great way to educate your class. Also, performance standards should focus on the benefits of an exercise, the functional aspects, and the muscles worked. So if we can put that into a functional aspect, explaining to the participants, hey, we do these particular exercises because at home I'm sure you do these types of movements. It's going to better give you a greater ability to perform these moves at home without any issues. And also the health benefits. We're building their awareness about how this is going to improve their health and their overall well-being. So use that time to educate your participants in your classes. They truly do appreciate hearing that type of stuff. Now, analyzing performance and providing feedback. Okay, ultimately, teaching techniques, including corrective teaching techniques and skills, help to empower our participants to improve in each class so that over time, their movement integrity enhances independently. So they need fewer and fewer cues from us to correct their performance on that particular move. So simple things is we want to make positive corrections. So again, cueing the solution, not the problem. So instead of saying, you're not breathing, don't hold your breath, you could say things like, make sure you're inhaling through the nose and exhaling through your mouth. Cueing the solution, not the problem. Always use those verbal cues and especially those kinesthetic cues when you can. Make sure you're giving those progressions and regressions instead of saying modifications, right? I hate that word modification. Instead, say here's a progression for those of you that want to amp it up, make it a little more difficult. Here's a regression for those that want to scale it back a little bit. And then lastly, offer that specific and immediate feedback right away as they're doing that movement. If something is not right, you see movement errors, we need to correct it right away. If we continue to allow them to do that error or that movement incorrectly, they're going to continue doing that over time. So we need to correct it right away if we see movement errors. So we want to seek to create experiences of empowerment for all participants, right? We want them to start to learn how to correct their own errors over time. Also, even just simple observational assessments are so helpful in our participants. And many people have postural deviations that really impact their movement patterns. One of the most popular ones we see is that lordosis. Now remember, we talked about this back with chapter 3, but that's having an increased anterior curvature. You see how the arrow is pointing down? The pelvis is tilting anteriorly, and therefore that's causing an excessive anterior curve of that lumbar spine. Okay, so this, people who are overweight, women in their 9th month of pregnancy, you know, that center of gravity is more out here, so therefore it's pulling on those bones forward, and that can cause a lot of back pain in individuals. Here you have the kyphosis, where you also have a little bit of an anterior curvature in that lumbar spine and in the pelvis, but here you also have an excessive posterior curvature in that thoracic spine. Okay, so that hunched back type of deal. So many elderly and older populations and people who do a lot of sitting at a desk, you know, we see that slouching, right? That poor posture. So that's a big one that we see with a large chunk of our population in our classes too. And then sway back is another one where you have that decreased anterior lumbar curve and increased posterior thoracic curve here. So it's kind of like the kyphosis, but not quite as defined as the kyphosis is. So simple observations that we can make are from the side, lateral, just looking at a person, from the front, anterior, and then even from the back. So I encourage you to maybe take a family member or a friend, someone at home, and take a look at them from each view. So when you're looking at them from the lateral view, you should make sure that their head is suspended. It's not pushed back or dropped forward. Okay. Also, it should be over top. The ears should be in line with the shoulders. The shoulders should be in line with the hips should be over the knees, and the knees should be over the ankles. So when you're looking at that straight line from the top of their head down to their ankles, they should maintain the 3 natural curves of the spine, and the knees should be unlocked and just soft. When you're looking at the anterior view, the arms should hang with equal spaces between each arm and the torso, and the hands should hang such that only the thumbs and index finger are visible. The kneecaps, the patella, should be oriented forward without deviation inward or outward. Okay, sometimes people have that deviation where their knees come together more or they go outward. And then even a posterior view, the feet should be shoulder width apart with the weight evenly distributed. There should be overall symmetry between the 2 sides of the body with no visible lateral shifting or leaning from one side to the other. So easy ways that we can detect postural deviations is simply looking at a person from the side, okay, from the front and from the back, and helping them to correct those deviations. Lastly, form and technique is another big part of proper cueing. So we want to make sure that we are maintaining slow controlled movements, especially during the strength training of your classes. So you could think of it as doing a 2 to 4 count moving up, 2 to 4 count moving down. Focus definitely on that muscular contraction. So that's when we want to encourage them to exhale during the contraction phase. Make sure they're absorbing impact on their joints, and obviously providing that good posture. Also in providing meaningful feedback, From your participants. Ask your participants in your classes, how am I doing? Stay after class to answer any questions and receive feedback from them. Ask them, do you like my music? Did you like the choreography? Did you like the, movements that we did in class? And get that feedback from your participants. If you're in a setting where you're an employee, you could talk to your supervisor, ask for an evaluation. If you have other peers or colleagues that you work with, you could ask them to attend your classes and give you some feedback. So along with education and experience, feedback from these participants, these supervisors, these colleagues or peers can help to shape your personal brand and enhance your marketability. Group fitness instructors should understand how to accept feedback from the following types of people in order to hone and develop their craft. And then lastly, looking at resolving conflicts. Not everything goes as planned, so when a group of people convene, no matter the purpose or the setting, conflicts sometimes can arise. So from having disruptive participants in your class, a lack of equipment, to even having arguments over someone's favorite spot in the room, these conflicts can arise when least expected. So we have to be ready to address those types of things. So looking at material issues, if we have a lack of equipment, have a backup plan to do. Do the class without equipment. So if you get there and something is not available, have that backup plan using just body weight exercises. If you have those location preferences, people argue over a spot in the room, the group fitness instructors should institute a first come, first serve rule, right? Whoever gets here first can pick whatever spot they want in the room. Okay, institute that rule right from the get-go. And then music, some classes do require certain branded music, so we should probably let the participants know. But also, again, getting feedback from your participants on the types of music they like is also a good thing. Non-material issues, things like if we are going to perform multiple partner exercises in our classes, your class description should definitely let people know that, because some people don't want to work together in a partner situation. So your description should definitely let people know this is going to be part of the class, so they can make that decision to attend or not. Odors is another one. Sometimes we have people that attend our classes that don't always practice proper hygiene. So maybe talk to your supervisor if you're an employee, or about this situation, or even say something in the class like, be mindful of others around you and wash your gym clothes, right? Simple things just to say in class. And then any harassments or threats, we definitely want to report that to management or to the facility operator as soon as possible. Instructor burnout. That's a common thing group fitness instructors do suffer from, especially if they're teaching multiple classes throughout the week. That demands our mental and physical energy. That can result in mental burnout and even overtraining physically over time. So many health and fitness professionals will experience this phenomenon to some degree at some point of their career. So group fitness instructors should understand the strategies designed to help them remain engaged and enthusiastic about their craft to minimize the risk of burnout or overtraining. So things that we can do to avoid this would be to maybe talk with other group fitness instructors about how to prevent or address it. What do they do, if it happens to them? Get some feedback. Take a vacation. Take some time off, right? Recharge both mentally and physically. Switch classes with another group fitness instructor to have exposure to new students, different people. Learn a new class modality, right? Instead of teaching the same style of class, learn something totally new. So if possible, hone your other teaching skills like imagery or the use of informative cueing to minimize the amount of time physically demonstrating in unison with the class. Also, attend classes as a participant or engage in activities outside of the gym. Going to other classes sometimes can give us a, elevated interest and spark new ideas in us. So these are all signs of mental burnout here: disinterest in exercising and teaching classes, a lack of motivation, um, really not preparing appropriately to teach classes, and even depression. And then, of course, overtraining physically. When we have instructors teaching multiple classes throughout the week, we can see overtraining syndrome occur. So, not sleeping well, having just an elevated resting heart rate, just general fatigue, changes in body weight. So, we have to take care of ourselves. And if we're teaching multiple classes, burnout is definitely something that instructors can suffer from.